Love, like the rain that falls unbidden, chooses its own hour and its own place, and in its silence teaches us truths no book could ever contain. The Last Bench in the Park, written by Victor Hugo. The park was not grand, nor adorned with marble statues or noble fountains. It was small, almost hidden between the weary buildings of the city, and yet, in its simplicity, it carried the soul of a sanctuary. There, at the farthest corner, where a tired bench leaned beneath the patient branches of an old tree, Sarah found her refuge from the merciless cadence of life. Each evening after her labor was done, she walked to that quiet bench as though drawn by an invisible hand. She carried always a book, but seldom read it. Her eyes, though resting upon the printed words, strayed often to the water of the artificial lake, where the dying light of the sun melted into trembling reflections. She came not for stories written by others, but for the silence in which she might attempt to write her own. Yet destiny, with its hidden pen, had already begun to inscribe another tale upon the same page. For on a certain evening, the bench was no longer vacant. A young man, with a sketchbook resting upon his knees, occupied the place as though he had been waiting all his life for that precise moment. His head was bent, his hair uncombed, and his hand moved with an urgency that betrayed not leisure, but necessity. Sarah hesitated. The bench was hers, or so she believed. But benches, like hearts, are never truly owned. They are merely borrowed by those who need them. With gentle voice, she asked, "May I sit here?" The young man lifted his gaze. His eyes bore the fatigue of toil and the spark of creation, like the candle that refuses to die in a storm. He smiled faintly. "Of course," he answered, "it would be an honor."
So she sat, and for a time the two shared silence, that most eloquent of languages. But the silence yielded, as it always does, to the question of curiosity. She noticed his pencil moving, and with timid interest asked, "What are you drawing?" He hesitated, then, with disarming honesty, replied, "You." Thus began the dialogue that binds souls more tightly than chains. His name was Amir. He was a student of art, struggling against the poverty of circumstance, yet rich in the abundance of vision. She was a woman of letters, hiding her heart in the folds of unshared pages. They discovered, in each other, a mirror that returned not the face, but the essence of being. Days passed, and the bench became their chapel. She wrote while he drew, and between them hovered an unspoken covenant, that beauty, when shared, is no longer fragile but eternal. And then, one evening of rain, when the earth itself seemed to confess its sorrows through the sky's tears, Amir remained seated on the bench though all others had fled. His clothes were drenched, his hands trembling around the sketchbook he clutched. When Sarah arrived, startled to see him there, he stood and spoke with a courage wrestled from despair. "This bench has no meaning without you. I do not wish for our encounters to remain confined to these trees, to this lake, to this fading corner of the city. I wish for them to extend into the labyrinth of our lives. Sarah, will you walk beside me?"
Her reply was not swift, for the greatest answers are not born of haste. But then, with a smile brighter than the drowned sun, she said softly, "I wished to speak those very words, but lacked the courage." Thus the rain bore witness to their covenant, and the old bench, weary yet eternal, became an altar of beginnings. And years later, when they returned and found the bench painted anew, they laughed, for though wood and paint may change, love once confessed is never repainted. It is carved forever in the unseen marrow of time.